Hello to those who've joined. We will give a couple of more minutes for everyone to join in. Thank you.
So are we on now or?
Yes, Robert, we're on now. We're just waiting for all our attendees to join in. We will start in 2-3 minutes.
You want me to start?
Sorry?
You want me to start?
No, I will just let you know after I introduce you. I will let you know that we can start. I think we can get started. So, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is well today. I am Ketki Virjay, Cancer Programs Coordinator with the American Indian Cancer Foundation, and will be facilitating our today's presentation. I'm currently located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the Dakota and Ojibwe land. Before I introduce our guest, we'd like to know a little bit about you. We welcome you to introduce yourself and acknowledge the land you're residing on in the chat section. Thank you for being in the community with us today. I welcome each and every one to today's webinar titled Art is Healing, presented by Robert DesJarlait to celebrate Indigenous Life Day. Before we transition into the webinar, here are a few informational pieces we can take a brief look at. First, we will get into the ACAF story and a little bit about our team, have you introduced to Robert, and let you know what today's webinar would look like and go through a few housekeeping pieces. I'm grateful to introduce our speaker for today, Robert DesJarlait, who is a native of Red Lake, Ojibwe. Providing you with a brief introduction about ACAF, American Indian Cancer Foundation is a national nonprofit established to address tremendous cancer inequities faced by American Indian and Alaska Natives. To eliminate cancer burdens on American Indian families through education and improved access to prevention and early detection, treatment, and survivor support. Our vision is a world where cancer is no longer a leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaska Natives. Through hard work, culturally appropriate community-based programs, and policy change that affords Native people access to the best prevention and treatment strategies, we see a day where American Indian communities are free from burdens of cancer. As I said, I was grateful to introduce our speaker, Robert. Robert is a colorectal cancer survivor and a fine artist, muralist, writer, historian, and educator. His paintings and illustrations primarily focus on the traditional family life, the role of women in Ojibwe-Anishinaabe culture, and origin stories. He has served as a cultural mentor and advisor on many public art projects. He has authored and illustrated several curriculum units for American Indian education programs and American Indian agencies and organizations in Minnesota. Robert is listed in Who's Who in American Art, reference Encyclopedia of the American Indian and American Indian Painters. He currently lives in Onamia, Minnesota. Today's Art is Healing webinar focuses on using creativity to aid in balancing mental and spiritual health during cancer recovery. In essence, art activities form an important part of one's treatment. This presentation provides a look at the process of art and its transformative power to heal from pain and trauma. A few housekeeping pieces that I would like to go through before we start with this webinar. This presentation will be recorded and uploaded to ACAF's YouTube channel where everyone can review it. Please be sure to mute your microphone. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat box and we will try to answer them all at the end of the presentation. If you wish to contact ACAF or Robert beyond this webinar session, please feel free to reach out to ACAF at this given email ID and to Robert at this given email ID as well. I will have these email information in the chat section for us. We are grateful for each and every one of you sharing space with us today. Robert, we're grateful to have you here today. And now I pass it on to you.
Ojibwe-Anishinaabe dude, Minowa, and then away Maganite. In the soul you shik, in the go Ojibwe-Man, Makwa, in the dam, Mr. Kamiwe, Sagaganen, in the Jiva. And my name is Robert DesJarlait, and I'm here to talk a little bit today about art is healing. And I think probably I should start off with talking a little bit about my cancer journey and what led me here. I contracted colon cancer in 2013. In April of 2013, and I had symptoms. I kind of ignored them at first, but I ended up collapsing twice and ended up in the hospital. And when I saw my doctor at NAC, at the Native American Community Clinic, she ran some blood tests and my red blood count was low. I was anemic. And she asked me if I wanted to see a specialist at U of M. And I kind of knew at that point that I was dealing with most likely cancer. And cancer is something that ran in our family. My father passed away from cancer in 1972 from stomach cancer. So we always kind of had this fear of cancer in our family. I think that's probably why I was kind of hesitant at first about seeing a doctor. But I went to the U and I saw a specialist there, and she did a CAT scan. Originally, they scheduled me for surgery like in 4 weeks from the time that I saw her. But after she got the results of the CAT scan, she wanted to do it right away. And as soon as that it could be done was like in 2 weeks. So they did I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but they did laparoscopic surgery, which is considered to be a kind of a non-invasive surgery as opposed to open surgery. And they removed my ascending colon, and there's a tumor in my ascending colon. It had gotten into the wall of my colon, but it hadn't broken through, which was really a good thing on my part, for me. It was considered to be stage 1 colon cancer, and the survival rate, 5-year survival rate for stage 1 is like 93%. So, I thought I got through it pretty easy. I had this, brief brush with cancer, but they did consider me a high risk patient, so they put me on a surveillance program, and I went in for CAT scans once a year, in addition to lab and blood work. And then in 2016, my college gave me the results of a CAT scan they took, and he said, "Well, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you." And I said, "We found something." So he ordered a PET scan the next day. And a PET scan is people look into your body, and it lights out areas of concern. And so they found a tumor on the left lobe of my liver. They also found a tumor up in my neck. So before they committed surgery, they wanted to do a biopsy in my neck. And that turned out to be, there was a tumor right up in this area on a lymph node. And it was right next to all of these nerves that go into your face. And the doctor called it a Wharton's tumor, which is a benign tumor, but that in 20 years' time, it could become cancerous. But considering my age, I'd probably be already dead by the time it became cancerous, so I decided not to operate. There was a risk with the operation, and she said we could accidentally cut some of the nerves, and you'd lose the nerves in your face. So they went ahead with surgery on my liver. They put me on neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Neoadjuvant chemo is chemo that they give you before surgery, and the idea is it might help shrink the tumor. And I was scheduled for 6 rounds. Chemo they gave me was really a very powerful chemo. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I believe it's called oxaliplatin. And in addition, I was also taking chemo pills in between periods of infusion. But by my fourth round, I had an extremely severe reaction to the infusion, and so they eliminated the other 2 rounds. My doctor said it wasn't doing any good anyways. It wasn't shrinking the tumor. So I had surgery in November 2016. It was a 9-hour surgery. The reason it was 9 hours is I had a hernia that had developed from my first surgery. And that hernia had grown quite large. So it took 6 hours to work on the hernia, and then another 3 hours on the liver, and they removed the left lobe of my liver. And following that, I was put on 12 rounds of another chemo. Irinotecan, I believe it's pronounced. And that's also very powerful chemo. And with that, I lost all my hair. Lost all my facial hair except my eyebrows, lost all my body hair. Had to deal with nausea, all kinds of side effects. It was a pretty miserable time to go through. I couldn't eat certain foods. I had a cold sensitivity issue where I couldn't touch anything cold. I had to wear gloves. And after that, they put me on an intensive surveillance program. So for 3 years, I was getting CAT scans every 3 months, along with lab and blood work. And then that would be followed with 2 years of CAT scans every 6 months. So I recently passed that 5-year mark. uh, this past January. And, that's one thing that survivors strive for is reaching that 5-year mark. You get to 5 years, the chances are likely that the cancer won't ever return. But it can return. I mean, I know people who have made 5 years and 3, 4 years later, the cancer came back. So you're always living with it, you know. Uh, Regardless if your doctor says, well, there's a small chance of it returning. I've talked to enough survivors to know that you have to be cautiously optimistic about in kind of a return. But one of the things I did after my second bout of cancer, I went back to my art. I've always been an artist. I've been an artist since 1984. I did paintings, and then I got into doing illustrations for various union organizations, agencies in the Twin Cities and Minnesota. And, that took me away from my painting. And then I also got into doing murals. And I did murals for several years. And all of that, again, took me away from being a fine artist. And, so with my second surgery, I saw that as my second chance of going back painting. So I began with the art show at Two Rivers Gallery, a solo show. And that was followed a year later with the show at HO Galleries up in Duluth. And that put me back on my path as an artist. And I think maybe we should probably take a quick look at some of my art. First, this is from 2019, and all these are titled in Ojibwe. I don't have the titles in front of me. But this particular painting, it was bought for a permanent collection at an art gallery. And it's from a story that Meridel told me. Meridel was a very well-known and famous writer who wrote about women's issues going all the way back to the 1920s and 30s. She wrote about political issues. She was basically blacklisted during the McCarthy era. A couple of her children's books were blacklisted, including Sparrowhawk. And I had the opportunity to illustrate Sparrowhawk, being republished by Holy Cow Press. And so I spent time with Meridel talking to her, and she was telling me stories. And she told me one story about a women's gathering in Africa. And even though the government there, it was a repressive government, and even though the government allowed it, they didn't provide the women in their own country with any means of getting to the conference. So these women had to walk across the desert just to get to the conference. And the conference was held inside of a camp that had barbed wire around it. And I always remember what you told me about that, that there was a women's conference, and yet the government was basically intimidating the women by putting them into a camp surrounded by barbed wire. So this painting is a reflection of that story that Meridel told me. You can see the barbed wire forming around the 4 women singers. Uh, there's also the moon. Uh, and in this piece, I also show a lot of diversity. Usually my images are mainly Native American, but in this one, I want to show the diversity that all women are victims of femicide. We talk about murdered, Michigan murdered Native women, but uh, that goes across boards. There's a lot of Michigan murdered women, period, uh, regardless of their color. Uh, so that's kind of what I'm trying to get at this particular painting by showing the diversity of the women. Next painting. This one here, this kind of flattened out, but this is a story of Jingle Dress. It's a well-known story. An old man has a dream about his sick daughter, and dreams that she's wearing a certain kind of dress that has jingles on it. And after he wakes up, the dress is made, and the story is that when she put the dress on, she had to be led around drum. She couldn't stand on her own. And the second song, she got stronger. The third song, she could stand by herself. And it wasn't until the fourth song that she was able to dance on her own. And that's the story of the origin of the jingle dress. So in this painting, uh, I'm depicting the old man having that dream, and in that dream, seeing his daughter uh, in the jingle dress. Next painting. This is Woodland Dancers. This is a large piece, 24 by 33, and I'm a dancer. I dance traditional and I dance woodland. Uh, woodland is a fairly new dance in this area. Great Lakes woodland dance. Uh, Probably been around maybe 10 years or so, but it's uh, grown in popularity. Go to a lot of powwows in Minnesota, Wisconsin. They'll always have a woodland special. And woodland dancers wear floral outfits. They don't wear bustle. Some of the headgear, some of the more common headgear is turbans with feathers in it. And I kind of took this one from my dad. My dad had did a dance group, Chippewa dancers, and so I kind of reimagined it, reimaged it, and turned those into woodland dancers. And it's a large piece, a lot of color. Probably took me about 2 months to do this particular painting. Next piece. This is one that I'm currently working on, and this is an old woman, storyteller, and she's telling a story, and there's a group of 2 children and a baby and a cradle board. It's already outlined on the watercolor board, and I begin painting that probably sometime this weekend. But one of the things about my work is I put a lot of detail uh, into my images. So this particular piece here, it's probably from about 1850, 1860. woman was wearing a strap dress, the kind of dress that our women wore, and it had detachable sleeves on it. And these originally were made out of leather. Uh, the sleeves were to protect the women when they went out in the woods, protect them from getting scratched from trees and being bit up by insects. And when they're working hard, they would just remove those sleeves. Uh, when we began to get trade items, uh, they took fabric like broadcloth and began to make strap dresses made out of that material. Uh, so this dress here, I haven't quite decided on the color of the dress yet. There's a lot of detail in there. At that time, even though we had seed beads, uh, the beads were just used for outline. Fully floral bead items didn't start happening until 1880, 1890, and that's where you find the pearl beadwork on leggings and bandoliers, bags, and dresses, and all other kinds of items. But originally, uh, beading was mainly restricted to using it for outlining. Cradle board is a cradle board from 1850, and again, you don't see any full forward on the moss bag. Uh, Again, they just use beading to do some outlining. Okay, let's go to the next piece. And this is a soft portrait that I did in 2019. The title of this one is Unfinished Garden. And that comes from something I read at a survivor support group on Facebook. And somebody had mentioned this unfinished garden, so I looked it up. And it was originally written by Michael D. Montagne. It was written in the mid 1500s. And he wrote, I want us to be doing things, prolonging life's duties as much as we can. I want death to find me planting my cabbages, neither worrying about it nor the unfinished gardening. So what that says to me, and what I know it says the survivors, but I can only speak for myself, but what strikes me about what he wrote is that in life we plant gardens. We have our own personal gardens that we plant. Of course, I'm speaking in the metaphorical sense. And we reach a point where we pass on and we leave behind an unfinished garden. We don't accomplish everything that we want to accomplish in life. We do what we can, and we leave behind the things that we started. The garden will always be there. The plants will grow, the seeds will fall, the soil will nourish the seeds, and the plants will grow again. Only we won't be there to nourish and harvest the garden itself. Uh, the unfinished garden is what I thought about when I did this piece. Uh, Self-portrait itself, one side of me, it shows the side of me like I usually look with the long hair and braid, goatee, and the other side shows me where I'm bald. that represents my journey with chemotherapy, my experience with it, I'm kind of half and half. Uh, there's also a lot of different meanings in those plants. They're not just there for decoration. Uh, they all have a specific meaning. Okay, that's it for the painting. Uh, what I want to talk a little bit about is art of healing. Uh, art is healing because I focus on a connection between my uh, mind, body, and spirit. Making art provides healing through a creative activity. When I create art, I'm using my mental and spiritual processes to engage in physical activity. Healing is an important aspect of the cancer journey. Surgery and chemo, those are traumatizing experiences. The body is different, your life is different, your mind is different. Surgery and chemo they can heal you medically, but there are deeper aspects of healing. Many survivors suffer from PTSD. Um, there are things that can set you off, take you back to the operating room or to the infusion chair. It can take you back to the morning when you woke up, nauseated, sick, or the food you ate, couldn't taste it. Uh, for me, there's a certain odors that set me off. Uh, the smell of certain plastics. I don't know why plastic does that. Maybe it's because that's what I smelled when I was in the hospital, especially when I was in the infusion chair. The nurse wearing a plastic gown. Uh, and the other thing that can set me off is the odor alcohol drugs, like lens cleaner, things like that. Uh, that just takes me right back and reminds me of the things I went through. And then there's long-term effects of chemo. In my case, it's fatigue and cold sensitivity. Uh, I'm still dealing with a lot of fatigue. Uh, so doing a painting uh, kind of requires a bit of an extra effort needed for me to do that. And the cold sensitivity, I have to wear thermal lining from uh, from the fall to the winter and into the middle of spring. Uh, this warm weather, I can finally wear shorts and t-shirts. Um, but once it starts getting cold out, if it's a cold day out, even in summer, I'll have to put thermals on to stay warm. Uh, so those are some of the things that I deal with as part of my experience. But engaging in art it takes me away from all that. Lessening that long-term trauma through art provides healing from it. I don't know if you've ever completely healed from cancer, in particular the trauma of experiencing cancer. But for me, art takes my mind away from it and allows me to heal from that trauma. That said, I believe art is an important healing tool for survivors. by art, I just don't mean painting, but other art activities as well, including beading, craft making, like making birch bark baskets or uh, mats made from reeds, traditional activities like maple camp and uh, harvesting, gnomon, uh, and dancing. Dancing can be a part of it. Making your regalia and leaving your tracks in the dance circle. Uh, there are so many art-related activities that natives can engage in to help in that healing process. So again, art is, uh, I think, it's an essential tool uh, as part of healing. I know there are hospitals. There are some hospitals that have painting activities for survivors, um, and they have other programs surrounding art to help with that process. So we know that art can heal. And I know from my own experience, uh, it does help tremendously overcoming uh, the experience of having cancer. Uh, like I said, I don't think you ever uh, get away from cancer. It's always there. You probably think of it at least once a day. Uh, you're always fearful that it's going to return. Every little ache and pain you get, it's like, oh my God, is it back again? Or, so, art helps take my mind away from those things. Uh, and like I said, there's all kinds of activities for people to get involved in to help them uh, lessen that trauma that we go through as survivors. So I think probably at the question and answer period, is there any questions that people have? Uh, I know we got a chat thing here.
Thank you, Robert, for sharing your powerful journey and those amazing artworks. Wondering if anyone has questions for Robert, and then you can put those in the chat section.
I think another thing I might want to mention is, I've been around the American Indian Cancer Foundation for a long time, and the first the first Paulo for Hope I went to, I was waiting for my diagnosis, uh, which I knew was going to be cancer. Uh, but I went to the first follow for my dad to honor him, and they had a jingle dress healing dance. And they had people go out to the center, and then the jingle dress dancers danced around them, and they danced 4 songs, I believe. And I remember when I went out to that circle, uh, I think a lot of people were shocked because it was like Robert has cancer or what. Of course, I hadn't announced anything at that point. But going into that circle was extremely powerful. And every Power for Hope that I've been to, I've always been inside that circle. And that was, a very powerful healing experience. I really thank the foundation for providing that. I think it was healing for all of us. Sat at the center and had the dancers dancing around us and touching us with their hands or with their eagle band or the eagle feather. Um, and then another thing also was the colon cancer initiative drive I did a few years ago in conjunction with the American Indian Cancer Foundation. And my wife and I, we made a eagle staff. And the eagle staff came from a dream. And my wife, who's an excellent seamstress, she's the one that put it together. And we gave that to the foundation. Uh, but that first year, we took it to different powwows. We went to powwows up north, and usually during supper break or at some point during the powwow, I would get up and go to the MC stand and talk about a little bit about my experience and encouraging people to get screened. Uh, and I still emphasize that to people. Uh, I mean, colon cancer is striking people 20 years old. I read about one youth who was 13 years old who died from colon cancer. And it's really important. I mean, it's unfortunate that the uh, screening age doesn't go down. Because most insurers won't cover it. So you just cover what's official. And I know that's been lowered to age 45, I believe. But I know that if I had been screened when I should have been screened, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I didn't know anything about screening. And then, 2013, I got diagnosed with colon cancer. But I encourage people to get screened. Such an important thing to do. And, the test might be uncomfortable for some people, but it's worth finding out that you're safe. And if you're not safe, if they do find something, they find it right away. It's curable, taken care of. But I know that the other thing I was thinking about before I came on this program is in the 9 years I've been a cancer survivor, I've lost a lot of friends to cancer, not just colon cancer, but for all different kinds of cancer. And there's so many people in our community who have contracted cancer, and there are many people who have passed on from it. I'm surprised, that when I find out about somebody who passed on from cancer. And I think it's something we need to talk about more. There needs to be more dialogue about it. Uh, I know cancer, at one time, there was a stigma just to use the word. People wouldn't even use the word. They're afraid to be used the word and you would get cancer. Uh, you can still find that in some communities up north. So it's something we need to talk about. And that's why I appreciate the work that the American Indian Cancer Foundation does in bringing that awareness. Uh, that awareness is essential. And more we talk about it, the more we can prevent it from striking people in our communities.
Robert, we do have a question for you from Facebook. Um, what would you say to survivors and others who are scared of connecting to art?
Say to survivors what?
What would you say to survivors and others who are scared of connecting to art?
That are scared of
Connecting to art.
Well, I know that, like I mentioned when I first had symptoms, I was hesitant about going in. So I just knew that I had cancer. Uh, but I went in. I mean, I went in because I have a wife, I have 4 children, and sometimes it's not just about you, but it's about your family. Uh, I, I, I really encourage people to try to overcome their fears of getting the information they need. Uh, I mean, sometimes the symptoms you don't know. You don't know if you have them. I've known people who went to the doctor and find out that the cancer spread all over their bodies, and it's much too late to help them. But if you go early enough, it's a good screen, you get checked, you can help prevent that from uh, taking your life. That's what it's all about. It's about your life. So I don't know. I know people are going to be fearful of it. It is a fearful disease. Uh, but it's also very survivable. There's a lot of survivors out there. Uh, yeah, certainly chemo is not an easy thing to go through. Uh, and it changed a lot of things for me, but I'm glad I went through that. I mean, I also use traditional things. I have a pipe, and uh, we have a traditional medicine, sage, sweetgrass, cedar, just doing those small things, putting out uh, tobacco, burning a little sage on occasion. Um, those are things you can do. You can also go to a medicine person. They can do a healing ceremony. I had a healing ceremony by Herb Sam. It's a real simple ceremony. So there's things that you can do as an individual. Uh, but I would encourage people to, you know, go to providers and get screened, get tested, not just for colon cancer, but for so many different kinds of cancer out there. There's over 100 different kinds of cancer, over 200 subcancers to go with it. But with colon cancer, I mean, what I believe is our diet changed. We used to eat very healthy food, and then once Europeans came here and changed our diet, uh, that's the reason why we have such high rates of colon cancer. Our kids are eating bad food. Uh, People need to start eating a little bit more healthier, trying to get back to a more healthy diet rather than going to McDonald's every night or whatever. I mean, I still eat fast food, but I don't eat it all the time. And my wife was always making sure I got something healthy to eat on occasion. So I have kind of a mixed diet. But again, as I said, I hope people can get over their fear and have themselves screened and find out uh, if needed, anything needs to be done.
Robert, we do have another question for you. Do you have a favorite artwork piece? Why or why not? A favorite
Do I have
artwork piece?
a favorite artist?
Artwork, any of your artwork, which is your favorite.
Art group?
And artwork, like your paintings, and which you discussed earlier.
Do I have a favorite? I didn't understand the question. Do I have a favorite what?
Artwork, any of your paintings or sketches
Favorite
that are, yeah.
artwork? Yeah, there's a lot of art I like, but my favorite artist is my dad. Uh, my dad was a famous Native American artist. He was one of the first modernists in Native American art. And growing up, he showed me a lot of things when I was growing up. So he's kind of like my personal art teacher, so to speak. Um, and his work has influenced my work to some degree. I always think about him when I'm painting. Uh, so he's definitely my favorite artist. But I like other non-native artists as well. I like Matisse. I like Gauguin. I like Van Gogh. I like Picasso. Uh, I have a very open mind when it comes to art and looking at the art of other artists.
Thank you for sharing that, Robert. I think it's about time. We do have a presentation right after this. So apologies if we could not answer to any of your questions. Robert, I'm grateful that we had you here, and it was wonderful hearing to your amazing words. I thank everyone for being here. Please take care and have a good day.
Yes, which for having me. You love them and
Thank you.